So we're both really here to help answer any questions that you have. My name's Simon Anderson, I'm from Audio Network, and we're a rights owner. We create music, and the company really was set up to make the whole idea of putting music into film a lot easier, and to make it accessible and clear away a lot of the complexity that were traditionally involved in licensing. And Andrew is MD of Rights TV, a company that was set up to help to clear rights for television, all rights, not just music rights, but any kind of rights, which Andrew will elaborate on a little bit later on. So they're two quite separate things to consider: clearing rights and creating revenue. There are links between them as well, but obviously we're going to look at the importance of clearing rights, why you need to do it, where the revenue actually goes, and then how you can also make revenue yourself from owning rights yourself in the creation, the films that you're creating. I'm going to talk a bit about why it's important from a rights owner's perspective. Why do we need to issue licenses in the first place? Why do you need to pay us money? Where does the money go? We're going to look at the kind of the flow of that side of it. And we're also going to look at the different types of music that are available to filmmakers, the pros and cons of the different kinds of music. So hopefully, help to give you some guidance into where you can find different types of music for your films, and what's going to work best for you. Andrew's going to talk, as I said, about all the different rights and the clearance issues. And we'll have some sort of general questions at the end, but please do, at any point, jump in and ask any questions, just so that, particularly with a smaller group, I think it's important that we focus it on the things that you're really interested in. It helps to keep the things sort of informal as well, and ask questions at any time. We've got a handout as well at the end that sort of summarises the different types of rights. So don't think you've got to scribble absolutely everything down that we say, and it's got sort of contact numbers on and bits of information that hopefully you'll find useful. So we're going to start by looking at the process of music clearance. I thought it would be quite useful to sort of explain from a music publisher's point of view how the process works for us, and how the revenue sort of flows through from the content producers and broadcasters through to the publishers and composers. As I mentioned, Audio Network was set up fairly recently. We're 10 years old this year, and the whole idea of the company was just to make getting music into film a lot easier than it traditionally has been. Our two founding directors, Andrew Sunnocks and Robert Hurst, previously worked for another music library, and I think there they got a sense of the difficulties that people were having, that filmmakers and broadcasters were having in actually getting music licensed simply and affordably. So they came up with a new business model really for a new music library that just had one simple license that gave all of the rights that you would need. They sort of did a Dragon's Den style cap in hand tour of media investors and got the £1 million that they needed to get the company off the ground, and started recording. Obviously, if you're starting a music library, you need a load of music. And to be able to give this simple license, we needed to own all of the rights in the music ourselves. So we couldn't sort of take licenses from other libraries and offer tracks that way. So we really started from scratch and got a lot of new music recorded. We offered composers shares in the company instead of paying them money, which meant that we've got a nice kind of family of composers who actually own part of the business as well, which I think is fairly unique. And really it's grown from there over 10 years. We're now up to about 50 staff worldwide, and we have offices in the States and Australia, Holland, Canada, and then we've got some publishers who represent us throughout the rest of the world as well. So the idea is that really, wherever you are in the world, you should be able to get hold of our music very easily. And we're up to 40,000 tracks now. I think one of the problems we had in the early days was that to be a library, you've got to have a certain amount of music. You know, in year one we were going around with little wallets with 12 CDs into Channel 4, saying, you know, here's our library, would you like a license? And understandably, you know, they weren't so keen to snap it all up. But I think I joined 6 years ago, and at that point we had 100 albums, and I think once we hit 100, there was a big full binder full of CDs. And that seemed to be the point at which it was a sort of a viable library, and there was a little bit of each genre of music. We're now up to about 600 albums and 40,000 tracks and growing. And we're still trying to grow, obviously, without lowering the quality bar. You know, a lot of libraries have been around for decades. I think DeWolf is was the first music library, and they started in about 1912 or something like that, making music for silent films. So, you know, obviously they've got hundreds of thousands of tracks, and you know, we're trying to increase all the time, but at the same time to keep the quality high. We talk to customers all the time to find out what kinds of music they want. If we're asked for stuff that we don't have, we make sure we go out and record it. So it's an exciting company, I think, to be with, and you know, we're continuing to grow. And to look at the kind of the money side of things, the composers assign all their rights to us. So if I compose a piece of music today, I automatically own the rights in that music myself. It has to be sort of fixed in some form, so I'd have to, you know, sing it to the camera, and so it would be fixed, and there'd be a recording of it made, so I could then register the copyright in that song as my own. I'd have a difficulty, I think, in selling it to a broadcaster on my own or to a production company, so I really would need a route to market, such as a music publisher or a music library, and so that's where Audio Network comes in. The composers assign the rights of the music entirely to Audio Network, and then the customers come to Audio Network for a big selection of music that they own all of the rights in. So we register the rights in the music with the Performing Rights Society in the UK, and we keep all of the other rights in the music, so we can issue sync licenses, mechanical licenses, dubbing rights licenses for the sound recordings, but we assign the performing right in the music, the sort of public performance right, the broadcasting rights, to the PRS in the UK, and then the PRS issue licenses to the broadcasters to broadcast the music. So we couldn't really sell the music directly to a broadcaster ourselves, because they wouldn't want to pay us a small fee for a small amount of music when they're already paying millions to PRS for all of the other music in the world, pretty much. And PRS then license the broadcasters, so that the broadcasters will pay, you know, depending on how big they are. Obviously the BBC, ITV pay tens of millions a year to PRS. Smaller broadcasters, it might be tens of thousands a year, but it's based on your sort of share of the viewing figures and the amount of music content that you have in your programming. And then the producers of the programs fill in cue sheets, so they list all of the tracks that they use, pass these to the broadcasters who have to supply them with the PRS as part of their contract with the PRS. And it's the PRS who then go through the cue sheets and work out if it's on BBC One prime time, it'll get 60 quid a minute. There's 30 seconds of this track here, so that gets 30 quid. If it's on BBC Three, it might only be 5 quid a minute. And you know, down to some of the smaller cable channels where, you know, they don't even pay out on every day. They do sort of a sample, so they'll take one day of a poker channel a month and just pay out the tracks that are on that particular day. So it's a complex process, but it's about as fair as it can be, I think. You know, when you consider how many millions of music tracks there are out there, and how many tracks are on the TV every day, how many channels there are. But the principle is that the more people see your track and the longer it is, the more money it will earn. Obviously that really does rely on cue sheets being filled in accurately, and we always beg and plead with our customers to do this, because it really helps the system to work. It's never going to be a perfect system, and there are loads of technology sort of development with things like fingerprinting, where you can fingerprint or watermark your piece of music so that it can be electronically identified, and PRS and broadcasters are looking at all these different types of technology that are going to sort of take out the real paperwork and sort of intensive, labour-intensive side of it and automate it a bit more and make it a bit more accurate. And we're all big fans of that. And I think the sooner that comes in, the better, really. But that's essentially how the process works. PRS are just obviously in the UK, around the world, in most other countries of the world, there is an equivalent collection society. So in the USA, there are three: there's ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. In Germany, there's GAMA, and so on around the world, and they all have reciprocal agreements with each other. So, for example, if our music's on television in Germany, the German broadcaster will collect the information and pass it to GAMA, the German PRS, and then they will pass the royalties back to the UK PRS, take a nice slab of commission, of course, and then PRS take their own bit of commission on. But eventually the money will flow back to the publisher and the composer. And it's standard, really, that the composers share 50% of the revenue. So although they assign all the rights to Audio Network, they will be paid their 50% directly by the PRS. They will be members themselves, and Audio Network will get the publishers 50% direct. I think in commercial music, it's more common for 75% to go to the composer and 25% to the publisher. But with library music, 50-50 is standard and absolutely fair. I think we each bring the sort of this, we couldn't survive without the other. We need the music, they need the platform to the route to market. So it seems to work fairly well. It's never going to be perfect, but it's a good system, and I think it helps a lot of people make a good living out of writing music for TV. And it's one of those things that not everyone really thinks about. Everyone wants to be in the charts when they're 18. These budding musicians want to be a rock star, but actually writing music for television is also a really good sort of revenue stream. So maybe it's a good time, Andrew, for you to talk a little bit about Rights TV and what you do.
So good morning, everyone. So my name's Andrew Baker. I run a company called Rights TV, and what we do is we work with producers and production companies to really help them produce the programs or the films that they're creating. So we get involved with negotiations with financiers, so that's broadcaster, distributors, whether it's private equity, any of the kind of range of finance that's available. But we also get involved with the day-to-day production activities of actually making sure the paperwork's in order, that everything's been cleared properly, that contracts are in place, so that really the producer is left free to do what the producer's best at, which is making the show, and thinking about the on-screen side of the business. If you like, we get involved on the commercial side and the kind of rights clearance side. So my background, just to kind of give you a bit of context, is I qualified as a solicitor originally, many years ago now, and then I went in-house to Granada Television in Manchester, and I ended up being head of business affairs at Granada. I was then in LA at Granada Entertainment in the USA, doing deals for the American side of the business, and then came back to Network Centre. So I was there for ITV doing broadcast deals, so commissions from producers, various interactive and online stuff, red button deals. And then I set up Rights TV about 7 years ago, and we now look after over 100 production companies of all genres, all sizes, all shapes. Most of our business is documentary, specialist factual features, but we also do drama, comedy, entertainment, animation, just about anything really. At the moment we've got a couple of projects that are, one's an iPad book, we've got a couple of apps, we've got various documentaries, and I don't know if anyone watched BBC In With the Flynns, but we just finished that a couple of months ago, BBC One sitcom. So we do a wide range of different things, and that helps us really kind of understand the way the industry works from both sides, both from broadcasters and from producers' side. So really the point of today for me was to really talk to you guys about the importance of clearance. What do we mean by that? How does it work? And actually, why should you be bothered about this? Well, I guess before I started, I wanted to get a feel for kind of people in the room. So how many of you are actually producers? Actually, for you? And the rest of you are students, or are you? You, sir, for example?
Well, I'm finance manager for a Commonwealth Broadcasting Organisation. That's all public service broadcasters.
Yep. I know them. I worked for you a couple of years ago, so excellent to see you again. So, I mean, when we talk about rights clearances, I guess what we're talking about is getting permission from somebody else to include their material, their contribution, whatever it is that they are providing in your project. And really that's all we're talking about. We're talking about saying, okay, if someone is providing something, a service, providing music, providing photographs, providing audio-visual material, and it's in your project, you need to have their permission to do that. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule. So in the UK we have something called fair dealing, where you're allowed to include material without actually getting permission from the owner. But the problem with things like fair dealing is that they're very limited in scope, and as producers they restrict what you can actually do with your project. So for example, fair dealing is great if you want to broadcast in the UK only, but if you want to start selling your programme internationally, you can't do it. No one will touch it. Your rights have to be properly cleared to sell things internationally. So how do you decide what you actually want to clear? Well, I guess you need to start from a position of saying, what is it you want to do with your project? If this is going to be something you're going to show to your friends, and it's never going to be online, it's never going to be published, it's never going to be on a broadcaster, then actually clearance is less of an issue. But as soon as you start talking about saying, I want to sell my programme, I want to put it on the internet, I want to make a DVD, I want to kind of get people to buy it, I want to actually try and raise some money from my project, then you have to really seriously start thinking about your clearances. Why? Well, the simple answer is, if you haven't cleared a particular contribution to your show for the particular use that you want to make of it, then you can't do it. Or you can, but you run the risk of being sued. Certainly if you are entering into contracts with distributors to exploit your project, one of the first things they require is that you've cleared all the material in your programme. And if you haven't, they won't take it. And therefore you won't be able to make any money from that show. So you need to think when you're starting off, what is it that's going to happen to my project? Am I going to sell it internationally? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be a game? Is it going to be, are you going to sell the soundtrack? What are you going to do with it? And that will then inform your negotiations with the various parties, because you can then clear for those specific uses. So it might be that this is only going to go online. Okay, well in which case you don't need to pay to have it cleared for television, for theatric, for non-theatric, for DVD. And if you're on a budget, which everyone is, then the cost of clearance is quite an important issue. So you need to make a decision fairly early on about what is it you want to clear for, so that fits within your budget.
So the rights owner will look at your usage and work out.
Absolutely. Now, not for everything. So for example, if you are interviewing someone for your documentary, chances are you will get them to sign a release form that says you can use that in all media worldwide. And usually you won't even pay for it. That's just a very straightforward, they're a contributor, they're being interviewed, end of story. But if you're talking about photographs or clips from other programmes or footage that somebody else owns, then absolutely they will be asking you, what media are you going to do this for? How long? How many years? Which territories? Is it worldwide? Is it UK only? Is it just Europe? And broadly, the more use you want to make of something, the more they will charge you for doing that. So if you want an all-media worldwide in perpetuity clearance, then that's going to cost you more than saying, actually I want to clear this for 3 years for use on BBC Three, and it's only going to go on television, we're not going to do anything else with it. However, you do need to think, if you're going to sell it to BBC, but you then get an opportunity to sell it internationally, you need to be able to go back and ask for more clearances. So you need to factor those costs in. If you're then saying, great, a distributor will pay me $10,000 for my show, well that's wonderful, but if it costs you $12,000 to clear, you need to just be careful about what you're doing. And generally, it's often cheaper to clear everything up front. So if you go and clear just one thing and then go back and clear another one thing and then clear another one thing, it'll be more expensive than just going and saying, actually, you know what, let's clear everything all in one go. So it's worth just thinking about what you're doing, what your budget is, what media you're talking about. So what are we talking about? Well, what actually needs clearing? So certainly anyone who appears in your show, so you're talking about contributors speaking direct to camera. You need to think about, you know, who else is in your programme. If you're filming a crowded street in London, you're not going to be able to go and get release forms from every individual person who's walking past. But at the same time, if you're speaking directly to someone, or they're in focus all the time, or they're recognisable, then you do need to be able to clear that. You do need to get their permission that you're going to be actually in the programme.
We don't want to
yeah, it was quite funny. We turned up this morning and we were presented with a release form because this is being filmed. Hello. So you know, this is absolutely what we're talking about. If we didn't sign this form, in theory, DocFest would not be able to put this on their website. They would not be able to use clips for promotional use. You know, they'd not be able to use the film that they are making. Now, if you can't use something that you're making, it kind of defeats the purpose of making it in the first place. So clearances are really important. They don't need to be complicated. They don't need to be complex. I mean, effectively, all this clearance form says is this bit here. It's a few lines and then a signature block. And it just says, we can film you, we can use it on the internet, and we can use it for promotional purposes. That's all it has to say. But DocFest has got a very specific use they want to make. So they're not asking me if they can release this on DVD. People would buy this, wouldn't they? Paid to see it. Yeah, absolutely. So you know, they're not asking to sell this internationally. So you know, we've not charged very much for this. You know, just a couple of glasses of water and a pizza maybe later on. But you know, if they were saying, actually, you know what, we're going to sell this program, and we're going to charge £100 a time for producers around the world to access this great information about music and clearances. Well, you know, maybe we'd want a piece of the action. Maybe we'd want to say, well, actually, we want to have some level of control, involvement, or something else. And that's why clearance is so important, because you need to be able to get permission from that person who's in the programme to actually do what it is that you want to do.
If we put some music in it as well, then it gets even more complicated. So if as a composer I compose a little jingle, DocFest is great, then suddenly we've got a piece of music there that I've composed. It's set down in permanent form. I register it with PRS tomorrow when I get home, and the DocFest guys have got to clear the rights to use that piece of music.
Probably only 20 pence though, isn't it? We should do this more often. Yeah. So individual contributors for documentaries is usually the most important thing, because that's who you're talking about. But actually, if you're going to film on somebody else's premises, you know, you're going into a museum or a library or a corporate headquarters, then you need to have a location release. You need to have permission to come and actually film on somebody's premises. Usually that's more a question of just satisfying the paperwork, because quite frankly, if they're not happy with you being there, they won't let you in, unless you're doing secret filming, in which case obviously different rules apply. You obviously need to clear music, so if you are putting backing music behind your interviews, if you're filming in a nightclub and there's music that's going on behind you, ambient music, if you're filming a band rehearsing or a concert, anything that is music that is in there that is recognisable needs to be cleared. And the interesting thing about audio networks is that because they're a library, they provide music that is pre-cleared for your use. So you can buy a license that allows you to do whatever you want with the music in the context of your program. But if you're talking about music that is specially composed, or indeed music that someone else has written, so a local band, for example, then you need to get their permission, because there aren't any big collection societies or anyone else that they might have registered to. There may be just some students or whatever else. So you need their permission to actually use that music in your program, over and above the actual performance that they're undertaking. And so you might get into then issues with record labels, with who actually owns the music, who wrote it, and so it starts to get very, very complicated. But in broad, if there's something in your program that someone else is providing, it has to be cleared. So it's always worth thinking, okay, who actually owns this rights? What is the music that we're talking about? I had a particular client who came to me and said, I've just finished doing a documentary in Africa, and we filmed various people, and we've got all the release form, and it's all fine. And I said, great, so you filmed all that, that's wonderful, and what about the music? oh, well, they were just singing some songs. And I said, well, you know, which songs were they? Well, we don't know. And they had to go back and find out what songs they were singing. Now, some of them were just, you know, traditional folk songs, effectively, in which case that's fine. There was no real issue there. But it turned out...
Technically, if it's a traditional song, there's still an arrangement in it.
Absolutely.
You could do London Bridge is Falling Down, you know, an old nursery rhyme, and it's public domain. But by singing it, you know, if someone's playing the drums in it or someone's doing a little harmony, they're creating a new arrangement of that, and technically they would own the publishing in it and the sound recording. So you're going to need them to.
So we had to get release forms for them. But the really fun bit was that they actually were singing a pop song. And they didn't realise it was a pop song because it was a local artist. It was in Nigeria, and you know they thought, oh well, it's fine, it's fine. It turns out they were signed to EMI, so suddenly it wasn't fine anymore. And we started dealing with big major record labels, and it wasn't what the producer had expected. And it took, I'm not kidding, it took 2 to 3 months just to clear the music. Because they hadn't thought about it in advance, they hadn't done anything at the time, they hadn't asked, what is that music you're going to be performing? Is it local traditional? Is it something in the charts at the moment? Not particularly being au fait with the kind of current Nigerian top 10. I couldn't help them at all. It was literally a question, I'm afraid you're going to have to go and find out what that music is. Well, you can't use it because it's not cleared. It's not available for use.
And the broadcaster BV wouldn't take the
well, exactly, and so the issue really is, why would you clear? Well, effectively, when you do an exploitation deal with someone, if you go to a broadcaster, you go to a distributor, one of the things they will ask you is A, to deliver all the paperwork to show that you have cleared all the bits and pieces of music and rights and everything else. But B, they'll have lots of warranties in there, and they will say, you are promising that you have cleared all this material, that there's nothing in here that someone's going to come after us about. And quite often you'll find you also need to take out E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance, to allow your programme to be sold internationally. And as part of that, they have a very strict criteria of things you have to do. So as a producer, you have to try and make sure you've got paperwork for absolutely everything. And if you don't do it, you don't get your insurance. Or if you say that you have done it, if you don't, the insurance won't cover you. So if somebody sues you for a breach of copyright, and the broadcaster turns around and says, we are very unhappy with you, we are suing you, then you don't have any insurance. And so the last thing that you want to do really is to go into a situation where your project is being exploited and you don't have insurance, and you don't have clearance. It kind of defeats the purpose of trying to make a programme, get it out there and make some money from it, because effectively you're going to lose your revenue.
I had a similar kind of question. Last year we did a rights surgery here. There was a lady who made a documentary about an inner city sort of poverty. I can't remember exactly where it was, but there was a child playing with a toy on a pavement, and it was a little toy car, and it played New York, New York, the Frank Sinatra song, and she thought it was a brilliant kind of juxtaposition of kind of glamour and Las Vegas. Wealth against this backdrop, and she I think it was EMI that published it, and it was quoted a crazy, something like 50 grand to have this about 20 seconds of New York in this documentary. I also told her that actually she needs to go to the toy manufacturer, who presumably would own the sound recording. It wasn't the Frank Sinatra version; it was someone else singing it. And they were fine about it, but the publishers insisted on this crazy sum for a tiny fragment of New York, just because it's a really big song. And I'm sure you find the more popular and well-known the song is, the more value it's perceived to have. So in the end, we had to find, in our library, we found a sort of an American tune that was nothing like the impact of New York, but sort of still conveyed a bit of the difference. And
you charged 49 right?
50 quid, I think it was. It was quite a bit less. Yeah. But it's an illustration of the fact that if you can hear it, you would think a toy car playing a little tune would maybe be very significant, but it's a copyright piece of music, and so it's got to be cleared.
Absolutely. I mean, just kind of turning to music. I mean, there are different ways of getting music for your show. So the easiest, most straightforward way is to go to some like audio networks and pay a license. And actually, that's the end of the story. Everything is cleared, everything is done. It's all very straightforward. The other alternative is actually to go to a composer direct and have them specially compose some music for you. Now that's great because you can say exactly what you want, what the style, what the tone is, exactly what kind of feel you want from the music. But obviously that's something that's sometimes quite difficult to convey. The composer needs to kind of work with you, and that can be quite a long process. Whereas if you just listen to them and say yes, that's what I want, it's obviously much easier. But you also have to negotiate with your composer. So you have to do a deal which says, actually, what rights are we taking from you as a composer? So normally you have something that's called a sync license, which is what Audio Network would give you. And what that is, it's a very simple agreement that says you can put this music with this project. So you can synchronise the music with the moving images. That's what it gives you then. So you can use it in your project for various rights and things, but it doesn't give you any of the revenue that Simon's been talking about here in terms of PRS revenue and things. And usually that's part of the negotiation. You'll be saying, okay, we'll pay you X, and you can keep publishing, so we can keep the cost as low as possible. Because the thing about publishing revenue is it's not a huge amount of money in one go. It comes in dribs and drabs from around the world, depending on how much of the program has been used in what territories and what their rates are and what the currency exchanges are at a particular point in time and all the deductions. So for someone who makes music as a living, it's a very important revenue stream. But as you being a producer trying to make your show on a limited budget, it's not going to help you in the short term, but obviously in the long term it can be beneficial. So if you can afford to pay a composer and take a share of the publishing, then great. It gives you a revenue stream down, over the number of years. But actually quite a lot of producers tend to take the attitude of, well, actually, we want a tight budget, we want to have as low a possible fee for the composer up front, and therefore we'll agree that they can take that publishing revenue, because a couple of £100 over the next 6 months and then another couple of £100 is not going to be an issue for us. We'd rather just make the show on what we have and be able to put the rest of the money on screen. So a sync license is normally what you would do. If you wanted to get into the publishing side of things, you'd have to do a publishing deal as well, and then you'd have to look at registering it and collecting revenues and doing all those sorts of things.
I think as a publisher as well, Andrew, the composer would expect you to exploit the work. You've got to work hard for your share, and obviously by putting the composer's music in your film, you're giving it exposure. But beyond that, you'd be expected to do all you could to sell the film, internationally, and maybe get DVDs and really exploit the revenue potential. So that's what a composer would really expect, rather than just saying, okay, you have 50% and do what you like with it. Because once the film's run its course, if it's just going to sit on a shelf for eternity and not earn another bean, then that music's kind of wasted, really. There's not anything else that can be done with it. So they'd look for some sort of offer of guarantee of sort of exploitation for it.
Absolutely. And then the third alternative is to actually go and buy commercial music. So if you want what we call a commercial disc, something that's in the charts at the moment, you want Coldplay, you want somebody else like that, U2, then you can go and license that music specifically. And again, that will also depend on what use you want, how long for, how much are you actually doing. The complication with commercial music is that for most music, it's registered with the relevant collection societies, but every now and again you find a little problem. And I was working on a show where they wanted to use some music from the Rolling Stones, and rather than going to a collection society and paying their scale rates, you have to actually go to the Rolling Stones and you have to ask permission to use their music in your show, and you have to explain why you want it and agree a deal with the Rolling Stones. And in principle, that's great, but they get so many requests, and that it's absolutely in their interest to say, well, you know what, it's too small an issue. We're not going to bother with you. You're not paying us $100,000 or $50,000. Where's your show going to go? It's for festivals. Well, you know.
Presumably that's because the bigger the artist, the more control they can have.
It is, and actually some of the artists have actually bought back all their publishing rights from the original record companies because they're making so much money, so that they can control the use of their music. And it's about control for them. For them, this is their baby. They've composed, they've written, they've kind of performed these tracks, and so they want absolute control over what happens to it. You know, for you as producers, you might not feel there's an issue with using their music on your show, but for all you know, that the same thing will apply if you were making an advert and you wanted to go and license that music for an advert. And so in theory, you know, if you were an oil company, or you were a fur manufacturer, or you were I don't know, McDonald's, or a fast food joint, you know, you could use whatever music you wanted for your advert. But if you have actually written that music and you want control over it, you might decide that ethically you don't want to be associated with particular brands, particular organisations. You know, you're an arms manufacturer and you want to use, Save the World or something. You know, there has to be, sometimes the composers say, actually, you know what, we want a level of control over what happens to our music. And that's absolutely justifiable, but for you as producers making your documentaries, it adds another level of complexity, it adds more time that you need to spend, and indeed more money in terms of being able to actually clear the music.
Presumably the publisher would tell you that you'd go to EMI and they say, sorry, mate, call.
Absolutely. You need to actually go specifically and see if they'll take your call, and you need to provide the information about what it is you're doing. Maybe even send a DVD with the kind of the documentary with the music on it to show what it is you're talking about. And of course, if that then changes, you need to go back and ask permission again. So it makes it a much more complicated process. So it's worth then thinking, well, actually, do we need that track? Or do we need something that sounds like that track? That has the same mood, the same feel, the same tone. So that's why you want to go to a library, because you then say, I'm looking for New York, but I don't want to pay £50,000 for it. And they can give you some alternatives, and you can listen to it in advance and say, no, that won't work, but that one will. So that's why library music sometimes can be a great help.
Is some commercial music unclear of what their language is?
Yes.
I've heard a few of these,
yes.
People say, oh, Bob Dylan, you never can get Bob Dylan for anything. Bruce Springsteen. Yeah. Does some people just say no?
Yeah, absolutely. Or they set the bar so high that it's just, for practical purposes, impossible. I mean, no one is going to be able to afford £50,000 for a 20-second clip of New York. It's just not going to happen. Unless you're making a £20 million movie, in which case, that's not an issue. I mean, that's great. But if you're making a documentary for television or for film, you're not going to have the finances available to be able to pay those kind of clearance rates. It's just disproportionate to the use that you're going to make.
What happened about the Beatles? Because I remember until about 10 years ago, you never saw a Beatles track on telly anywhere, and then all of a sudden you did. And maybe they sold their library, or someone bought it.
Well, my understanding of that is that actually Michael Jackson owned it at one stage and has had to sell it. Yeah. So probably part of the reason why it's now being exploited is someone's bought it from him and said, right, well, we need to make some money from this. We've just paid $100 million for the publishing rights to all the Beatles tracks. We now need to exploit it. So the Beatles are now on iTunes, which was a big announcement things. And it seems crazy that actually they weren't originally, but that's because of the people who have got control over these things. It's very, very important to think about the fact that in the same way as you guys are very precious about the programs you make, they're your babies, they're your passion. The music is the same for artists, and so there has to be a certain amount of sensitivity there, and not everyone wants their show everywhere. Not everyone wants their music everywhere.
I think that was Apple Records, wasn't it? They had a big fight with Apple computers,
right.
And it was a kind of trademark thing, I think.
That's right, it was, yeah.
Finally realised if they both got on with it, they'd both make a shed load of cash.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the end, money does win the day.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask as well about that. There must be a point at which it's in the content owner's advantage to say yes. And I remember in the 80s there was a whole string of Levi's TV commercials that used all these old 60s Marvin Gaye and a load of Motown, and they were all number ones. Back in the chart and made a whole load more cash.
That's right.
So presumably they would either give a free sync license for that or a very cheap one.
Well, I mean, I think in the old days, before those sort of things happened, it was a question of, well, if you want to use it for your advert, we will charge you for it. End of story. And I think now the labels are much more aware, and if you're going to do something where there's a huge amount of publicity involved, then they're going to say, actually, you know what, there's a deal to be done. And it starts to kind of move into the product placement arena, where you start to say, well, you know what, if you are a brand with a product, be that music, be that car, you know, a pen, phone, something like that, and you're using it in a program which is getting exposure, then rather than charging for that use, we might give it for free, or indeed we might pay you to include that in your show. And the UK rules, as most people are probably aware, have kind of been changing so that actually product placement is now allowed. Before it kind of happened, you know, it wasn't usually paid for, but people would usually supply props or materials for use in programs and just not charge for it. Now they can actually pay for it. So there are restrictions of what you can do, but you know, if you happen to need you know, specialist equipment for your documentary, then you know, go out there and have a chat with people. But rather than buying it off the shelf, you need to think about going to suppliers and manufacturers. Which leads me on to another area of clearance, which is actually the whole point of kind of the Ofcom rules and everything else, which is about undue prominence and product placement where it's not official. So you know, if you are doing something where you can see a branding shot, then it's not just about, you know, have they paid you to put that in there, but actually also are you complying with the Ofcom rules about product placement and about undue prominence. At Granada we had a talk from our compliance team about Coronation Street, and they had a great shot of Kevin Webster in his pyjamas talking, and it was a head and shoulders shot, and it lasted about 30 seconds. And for the full 30 seconds, he was like this with a box of Kellogg's cornflakes. And that cost Granada tens of thousands of pounds in fines because it was undue prominence. And you know, we started asking questions, well, what about the cabin and all the sweets and things? And they had to actually rotate all the chocolate bars and the sweets in the cabin, because otherwise, every time you did a particular shot, you would see the same brand. You know, and that's why the beers in the pub are kind of their own made-up brands, because otherwise you have an issue with saying, well, you can't promote Tetley's or you know, whatever else that you're selling at the time, which is why it was Newton Ridley.
But the BBC, sorry.
I had a very brief discussion with one of the distributors yesterday, who I know quite well, and they're now getting asked to warrant to their customers that there is no product placement in a lot of versions.
That's right.
So they're having to produce multi-versions of films because some territories will allow product placement, some won't. And they are going to come back to you for the warranties from you.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's a really good point actually, because then it leads on to this issue of versions. So, quite often what you will find is if you're making something for Channel 4, for example, they have a blanket license agreement for music with PRS and various other people, and so you can use a lot of commercial tracks on your Channel 4 show because Channel 4 want you to use Coldplay or somebody else because it gives them more impact. But internationally, it'll cost too much to actually clear those rights, and so your distributor will actually want you to provide two versions. One version which is for the broadcaster, which is all singing, all dancing, all the kind of, you know, special music in, and then an international version which has library music, which is fully cleared, which may creatively be just as good, but which isn't from specific defined artists. And that's because they can't sell that without paying huge clearance fees. And therefore, in most cases, it's a question of providing two separate versions. And that also applies if you're doing things like, I mentioned fair dealing originally, about actually including content in the UK version that hasn't been cleared. Well, you can't sell that internationally. So if you do have something that's been fair dealt, you have to take it out for your international version. All of which adds to the cost and the time in the edit. But you have to be really clear. If you don't have something properly cleared in your version, it can't be sold. And so quite often there will be this pressure of saying, well, we want to make the UK version as good as it possibly can be, but the international version is going to have to be slightly different.
It's yes, an interesting question. We do quite a lot of what is called reversioning, where you know, a customer will make a series for UK broadcast with a good deal of commercial music in, and then either they'll spend time themselves or we'll do it for them, and they'll send us the video with the timeline on and a cue sheet, and all of the bits of commercial music will then match to similar style pieces from our library, so they can then go and sell it to Australia, and it's all pre-cleared for broadcast over there. But you know, depending on the content, I guess, you could argue that it saves a heck of a lot of time and money to actually get pre-cleared, globally pre-cleared music in there, you know, from the outset. So it's an interesting question.
I mean, the other side of this is the revenue generation. So we've talked a bit about music publishing royalties and things, which are they tend to become more significant if you're talking about, you know, a large library of content. So some producers who are producing a lot of content for the main broadcasters will make a conscious decision that they won't choose library music where they don't have the publishing rights. They will choose specially composed music, and they will take a share of the publishing, because over a 5-year period and over, you know, 60, 70 episodes of different programmes, actually it's worth hanging on to those rights and paying a little bit more for them up front. But when we're talking about clearance, what we're doing is we're talking about actually allowing you to exploit the rights to your project in specific media. So if you don't clear for online, then you can't do download to own or pay-per-view or any kind of streaming online use. If you don't clear for DVD, then you can't sell the DVD, you can't make money from that. But also, one of the areas that people sometimes miss out on is things like clip rights. So if you actually have a program that's fully cleared, not only are you clearing what's coming into your project, but you can then sell not just the program, but also clips from your program. So other people might want to include your material in their program. And they will of course pay you a fee for that, and you will agree with them what clearances they're going to get and what you're going to charge them for that, and what media and what territories. So effectively, if you clear something, it gives you the opportunity to then start making money from it. And obviously if you don't clear it, it restricts what you can do. So it all comes back to the idea of, you know, what is it you really want to do with your program, where is it going to be exploited and shown, and you know, and thinking when you're making something about, you know, what's in shot. You know, if there's lots of music going on around you, you know, be aware that all needs to be cleared. You know, you've got to think about who's there and what is actually going to be on screen at the end of the day.
I know that lots of broadcasters now, when they commission music for particularly title music, the broadcaster will insist that they get 50% the publisher share, yeah, because they're putting it on the telly, they're getting the income coming in, and of course they pay millions a year to PRS. So if they can claw a little bit of that back by, you know, controlling a share of the content that they actually put on the telly in the first place, then it's in their interest to do that. And I think Channel 5 recently, when they were taken over, had a tightening up of all of their rules.
Yes, absolutely.
We had one or two production companies who were really irate. You know, they've got a whole series of programs that have been on the telly. They were on to sort of series 3, and suddenly Channel 5 say, well, you can't have that theme tune anymore. We need a new theme tune, and we're going to have 50% of the publishing rights for it. And, you know, take it or leave it. You know, if you don't agree with it, then it's the power of the broadcaster, I guess.
I mean, you know, if you're talking about, you know, Coronation Street or Emmerdale or EastEnders, you know, £60 per minute for the EastEnders theme. I think how many minutes a week in a year that actually starts to be quite significant money. Never mind all the international sales and everything else. You know, so, you know, if we did an impersonation, which I'm not going to do, you know, with the drums, you know, for the EastEnders music, you know, in theory, you know, we would need to pay to clear that, you know, or DocFest. So we won't put that one. So, you know, but all of that money starts to add up. And certainly when I was at Yorkshire Television, they had their own publishing company specifically to kind of cover all the music they did for Emmerdale and Coronation Street and all the shows that Yorkshire Television produced. And you know, I thought, well, it's, you know, it's a nice income stream, but it's not going to be a lot of money. And you know, this is quite a few years ago now. And I was in with my boss, who was the commercial director, and he was opening an envelope. He said, "Oh, this is a nice one." I said, oh, what is it? He said, oh, it's a cheque for our music publishing revenue for this quarter. And I said, oh, great, how much is it? He said, it's £500,000. Now, that's a lot of music. You know, and it's because it's all prime time, ITV, full rates and things. But you can understand why the broadcasters are saying, well, hold on a minute, you'll have some of that. And you can understand why composers are therefore reluctant to share that if they really don't have to. But it's all a question of balance. You know, if you're not doing huge volumes of music, then in reality it's going to be less of an issue for you. And if you're doing stuff that's mainly on cable and satellite or some of the kind of smaller channels, then actually the music publishing revenue can be virtually nothing. So it really is a question of balance and making sure it's appropriate for the show that you're making.
I read an interview with the guys that wrote the music for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. There's quite a distinctive theme tube to that, but there's also a lot of what they call beds that just sort of sit underneath, you know, while the contestants are thinking of the answers. And they're just very little synth chords, you know, with a sort of slightly atmospheric drum beat to keep the tension up. And there's all that ding when the next question comes on. So in a half-hour episode of that, there's probably 20 minutes of music that's written by these three guys. And then this format is sold globally. I think it's an Endemol format. It's on in all over Europe and the States, and they've all got their own versions of it. But it's the same music, and so these guys within a year were all millionaires themselves just from getting a really nice commission to write music, and it's rolling in every day. You know, they can retire tomorrow. They can do another day's work in their lives because it's just right piece of music, right program. You know, and gosh, they got really lucky. But it helps. Yeah, it really helps. Can you imagine the show without the music on? You know, it wouldn't be half as effective. Loads of our music ends up in a lot of these kind of lifestyle shows like Location, and the cookery show, where you know lots of different shots of very different kind of atmospheres and different buildings and different cities, and each one has a totally different piece of music under it, which you know sets the atmosphere for that picture really well. And you know, again, if you imagine those programs without any music, you often don't notice it. I mean, I certainly watch telly in a very different way now than I did before I worked for Audio Network. I zone in on the music whenever it comes on. Is that commercial music? Is it a piece of our music? And you know, it's really interesting hearing how music is used and what impact it can make to a picture as well, and how empty pictures can be without it. I mean, that's not to say that it should be wall-to-wall music, and you can do great things with silence and sound effects as well. But you know, music can really add so much value to a picture if it's well chosen. I'm aware we're an hour in, and we haven't really had any questions at all. But you know, if anything's got anything that we've talked about or we haven't talked about that you'd like to ask, then please do.
Or even if you've had experiences where you've had problems that you want to share with them.
Sure.
Yeah, coming back to what you were saying before about product placements. I, for example, a project which involves shooting interviews with a lot of DJs, and some of them, you know, working away, and they're probably all going to be using a similar piece of kit, because it's a piece of kit that everyone uses who's at the top of their game, which of course has branding at the back of it. So if they're going like this at decks, that is inevitably going to be shot.
Yes.
Now, there's, well, first of all, there's the issue of trademarks.
Yeah, well, and indeed of undue prominence, because if you're framing your shot,
Yes.
and you've got this logo at the bottom, and every time you see the DJ, this logo is there, then certainly for the UK, for Ofcom, that's going to be a problem, because you've got undue prominence, it's there in your face.
Right.
The idea is they don't want your programmes to feel like an advert, basically. So there was a whole series of adverts they did a while ago, a good few years ago now, by the I don't know what it was called. It was the it was the predecessor to Ofcom anyway. And it was basically it was a spoof advert, and it was a guy with a can of 3X. You know, and he had the 3X there, and it was in shot, and then he opened the fridge, and it was full of 3X. You know, it was nice to see. And that's the point there. They want to make sure that actually, if you have something in shot, it's there for a reason, and it's appropriate to your show. So if you were doing a documentary about you know, the different kinds of decks you can buy, then it would be appropriate to have different brand names in. You don't want to have them in shot all the time.
No.
But if your show is not about that, it's about something else, it's about the DJs, then it's not really appropriate to have it in there all the time. You could certainly show it obliquely, but if it's in centre frame, there it is, bang,
Yeah.
then that would cause you a problem.
Right.
And you then get, so that's one issue, regulatory.
Yeah.
You then get an issue of, well, actually, ideally you'd want to clear that because it's use of someone's trademark,
Yeah.
it's their brand.
Yeah.
Particularly, the UK broadcasters aren't usually as worried about that, but certainly in America, any trademark of any kind or any brand that is in your show needs to be specifically cleared. So
You mean any brands?
any brand.
That's
Yeah.
So for example, we had a show where we were filming someone who was just completing a marathon, and he was running through the tape, great shot finishing, really, really nice. And of course he had branding all over his shirt. There was branding all over the timer, by a big kind of clock manufacturer, and there was hoardings all the way around with different brands and sponsors. And the producer had to go and clear and ask permission from every single one of those. And if we couldn't clear it, we had to blur it because it was in shot, it was clear, you could see the branding. I had another show which was it was a drama recon, and we were showing the fact that this person had gone to a petrol station, picked up some supplies, got into their car, driven off, and half an hour later the car broke down. They were abandoned in the middle of nowhere, had to survive, and all this sort of stuff. Great, really, really good telly. But we showed them picking up a packet of Doritos and a bottle of Coke, and it was a Shell garage, and it was a Dodge truck, and as the camera panned, I could see the logo all the way through, and it was a beautiful shot. The director thought it was fantastic, and we had to cut it because we couldn't, in the time we had available, clear that shot, and we had to blur the Doritos label, and it was a nightmare. It really was. And you also get things if you're filming people in real life, where they might have a Nike shirt or an Adidas shirt, or Manchester United football shirt. It's all going to be cleared.
I seem to remember a time, I can't remember if it was in the late 80s or the early 90s, where you had to actually stick gaffer tape over synthesizer logos for the pop.
That's right. That's right. Big Brother. In Big Brother, for the last few series, you were seeing cans of ketchup or beans or anything else, and there was tape all the way around it, so you couldn't see the logos because they're in shot so much. Even if you cleared it, it's product placement.
But where does it stop? I make an interview with you. You have a very nice designer shirt on. There's no logo, but you can recognize it. You sit on a famous designer chair.
Absolutely.
You have a glass which is designed by someone. With no logos visible, but where does this?
Where does it end? Effectively.
End, because you can keep on.
Yes, you can. Effectively, it's about being recognisable. So, for example, if there's no trademark on me, then actually you don't need to clear that brand. So the fact that I'm wearing,
even though everyone knows that this shirt has been
absolutely, because it's not actually a brand trademark. It's a product. But if I was wearing a sports shirt with a logo on it, a tick, for example, then actually, if you just do a brief shot of me, it's probably fine in terms of product placement and things. But if you are doing a shot, an interview of me, a head and shoulders shot, and I've got my logo there, it needs to be blurred probably. So I've seen producers go in and do interviews with some black tape and go, hold on a minute, right, now filming. And it looks bizarre, but it costs nothing compared to actually blurring every single shot where you have that logo in place.
The clearing, how does that kind of manifest itself typically?
Typically, you have to have something in writing.
So is it something where they'll go, permission granted?
Yes. Yes. Normally those sorts of things don't cost you anything. What the issue for them is, in what context is it being used? So if you are doing, for argument's sake, you're doing, Super Size Me, are you likely to get McDonald's to agree that you can use their trademark? Probably not, quite frankly. And so that starts a whole separate set of issues. And would have to be special exemptions from the broadcaster if they wanted to show it and things. But the general rule is, if you're doing something which has got some kind of recognisable logo or trademark in there, then A, it needs to be cleared, and B, it needs to not be so prominent that it's going to cause you problems. So the more times you see it, the clearer you see it, So if it's a long shot and you can tell I've got a football shirt on and it's red, that's probably fine. But if you do a close-up and you see the logo and everything else, then it probably needs to be cleared. But it isn't necessarily going to cost you anything. But the issue is you need to have a written evidence of this, because when you go to your broadcasters and do your music cue sheets, the other half of this is your release forms. And you need to be able to show that everything in there has been cleared and you have written permission. So going back again to what we just had to sign, it's a very simple piece of paper, but it records the fact that we have signed to say that DocFest can film this and film what we're saying and use it on their website and let other people see it.
Are there any guidelines? Sorry, because it sounds like a fairly complex area if I'm a filmmaker.
Yeah.
There's a lot I'm going to have to know about product placement. Are there Ofcom guidelines you can download?
Absolutely. I mean, the Ofcom's got a whole series of websites, kind of things you can download. If you, there is actually, I'm going to do a handout which you can get by emailing me, which will have kind of a lot of the points people have raised rather than a generic one. I thought I'd write something that was kind of relevant. There is actually a really, really good producers pack, which was provided by Channel 4 and Channel 5, which is online, it's free, and it's like the producer's guide. If you Google it, you'll probably find it very easily. It's a PDF document, and it's got all the rules and regulations, and also the practical examples of what you can and can't do for delivering programmes to Channel 4 and Channel 5. So from a UK perspective, it's really clear, it's really straightforward, it's very producer friendly, and it talks about music, it talks about trademarks, it talks about fair dealing, it talks about undue prominence, it talks about kind of what language you can use pre and post watershed. There's a whole range of different things there which are relevant for broadcast. If you start talking about film and theatrical distribution, then the rules are slightly different, but from a base level, if you look at that guide, it gives you a really good sense of what actually you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah, can I ask a question? You've talked about the kind of clearance of rights.
Yes.
And clearly, some bigger companies would have their own people internally who would do that.
Absolutely.
So you're doing this here presumably on behalf of anybody, but also presumably smaller companies who may not have this kind of setup.
Absolutely.
Are you all, the bigger companies also will have commercial agents who will help them exploit and negotiate rights.
Yes.
Does your company do that as well?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the point of what we do is we are effectively like having an in-house business affairs unit. So, when it comes to negotiating, clearing, exploiting rights, that's kind of what we do. So all the deals we tend to do these days have broadcasters involved and distributors of some kind.
That's also nowadays in particular a minefield. An international broadcaster may want, say, world rights.
Yeah.
And you may want to hold some of that, or you may want the internet, the download rights, the streaming rights.
And it's the thing is when a distributor takes your show, they want to sell it to make money for themselves as well as for you. So they will take a commission on every sale. But if you think you can make a sale in Germany or France or Italy yourself, because you're going to go to MIP and you're going to have a conversation with someone or you know somebody there, then you might want to carve those rights out.
Right.
So that's absolutely the kind of thing that we will be able to help you with. And really what it comes down to is who is best placed to make the money for you. It might be that you could do a sale, but maybe the distributor would do it better with no effort from you. And they might take a commission, or they will take a commission, but it might be that the net that you get is more than you would get because they know that the license fee that broadcaster is paying for other shows at that particular point in time.
I think the thing is with the distributor as well, particularly in secondary brands, they can often package your shows with other shows and get more than you will ever raise on the rest.
Yes, of course.
So they might sell 100 shows in one go.
Yeah.
And they often have output deals, so they'll have relationships with particular channels in particular territories or particular networks, and so they will be able to have an intro straight away and say, well, as Simon was saying, if you go with 2 CDs, it's very difficult to have a sensible conversation. If you go with 100 CDs, it's a much bigger conversation. And the same thing happens with programs. If you are a buyer wanting to buy programs for your channel, it doesn't always make sense to speak to 100 small producers if you can go to a distributor and see 1,000 different shows straight away, all packaged, all ready, all fully cleared, and know that just one contract will get you all of those deals in place.
Yeah, basically distributors will be selling series, which will be a mixture of producers.
Yeah. And just to finish up on that, does your website, how do you work, how do you charge producers? Do you have a tariff, is it a percentage?
Yeah, I mean for me in particular, we have a range of different ways. We can either charge hourly or we charge specific fees for projects, so we have something that goes aligned with your budget, so that it's fixed. Right. But what we do is we talk to you beforehand and we agree what works for you. We do sometimes do percentage deals, we sometimes do fixed fees, we sometimes do hourly rates. It all depends on your show and what works for both of us, really. But have a conversation.
I've been, we've kind of been talking around this. I mean, at what point do we, because you told us, it seems that from this producer's pack we can manage a lot of this on our own. At what point do we need to come to you as independent producers?
I mean, effectively, what the pack tells you is the kinds of areas you need to be thinking about. And it helps answer some of the basic questions. What it doesn't do is tell you about how to negotiate those, what specific language needs to be in your contracts. So for example, you can use a pretty basic release form for UK broadcasters. They're usually quite happy with kind of a fairly low level of complexity. But if you're going to sell to America, they want a whole set of language in there because in their opinion, for example, doing press and PR and promotion is a separate something that needs to be cleared. So if you have a contributor and you say, I agree that you can film me and use this in the programme, full stop, that's not going to work for America. They want extra language in there. So what we do is we help in terms of actually providing proper paperwork, and also if people start asking questions about, what's moral rights, why do I have to waive those? It might be that we can explain that and help change the language in a way that doesn't affect the clearance. But if you took that out, that would be a problem for somebody else.
And then I have another question, which is about a specific type of role. I don't know if it's...
Yeah, feel free. It might be something...
I mean, you can clear this up for me. What's the thing about if you've got a musician, an artist, and they're talking on camera, that allows you to use a certain amount of their music?
Nope.
Where did I get that?
No. Well, I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of things that people think are true. You get this thing of, it's public domain.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Public domain. It's on the internet, so we can use it. It's on YouTube, so there's no copyright. No to all of the above.
It's not that though. It's something
I mean, effectively, there is. I'm talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, what you're talking about is fair dealing. Okay. And there is a very specific UK exemption to the Copyright Act, which says, under very, very specific circumstances, you can use copyright material without getting permission. And one of those is for the purpose of criticism and review. So if you're doing a movie review show, you don't actually have to get permission to use a clip from the programme. If you're rating it, if you're talking about how good the actors were and all that sort of stuff. And in the same way, if you're interviewing a musician and you're talking about their music, you can play some of their music without actually having to get permission.
So I can do it then?
You can do it. However, the whole point of fair dealing is to allow you to do that. But fair dealing is based on the idea that it's current. It's something now, which means you can't then sell it internationally because other countries have different rules for fair dealing. It means you can't repeat it later. So you can't then put it on DVD, you can't have it online later on, because the whole point is it's got to be something that's relevant at that point of time. So the exceptions are very, very, very narrow, and most broadcasters will require you to properly clear things, and certainly all distributors would require you to take it out if you're going to sell it internationally. So if you clear it up front, great. And at the end of the day, if you're doing an interview with a musician, it's a bit of press and PR for them. The chances are they'll be quite happy for you to use some of their music and to do a deal about clearance. And that's the time to have the conversation. What you don't want to do is to go back, long time later and say, actually, we showed it once, but now we want to put it on DVD. And they'll go, well, thank you very much. I have a license for that. Right. So, if you clear things up front and you think about what you want to do with your programme, it saves so much hassle, it really does. Because you only have to do it once. And everyone's there, you're having the conversations, and you can make a decision. You know what, if they're not going to let us clear the music, we'll find somebody else to interview.
It wouldn't work like that in the production, I'm thinking, but I like the point you're making that this particular artist might at least be able to sort of curry some favour with his publisher, which is rough trade, I think. Yeah.
So if you're going to do something which means that this person's on a programme talking about their music, there might be an upswing in the interest in their music. So there is press and PR value and also commercial value in the record label or the publisher saying, you know what, yeah, we're quite happy with that.
Yeah, public domain just came up, and there are ways you can get around with music. You know, there is public domain music. It's complicated because different countries have different terms of protection, but generally 70 years after the composer died, so if you go back to, you know, the people who died in the 30s, Gershwin, Elgar, and before that obviously Mozart, Beethoven, you know, you can get lots of good classical music. There's still copyright in sound recordings, and in the UK it's 50 years. So if you can get a recording from the 1950s, which, you know, was pretty good by then, the recording standards, of a piece of Mozart, for example, then, you know, you're fine. You can use that really is, you know.
But if you get your local musicians to sit down and play it, then they need to be cleared, because all the music is out of copyright. They're creating a brand new performance, and so you know, they need to be cleared. But you know, if you can find an old record and, you know, you play it, scratches and all the things, then yes, you know, in theory, you know, you don't have to declare that.
And do you know that, I mean, I've heard two different answers to the question about remasters, if the EMI remaster an old recording.
Ooh, it's a contentious issue. I mean, the issue for the music labels really is that they've made a lot of money selling classical recordings. And one of the real pressures to extend the copyright date from 50 to 70 years was this issue of, well, actually, we were spending a lot of money, you know, 50 years ago, recording a full orchestra with specific, you know, high-profile players and composer and everybody else, and we're trying to get a return on our investment. And as soon as the copyright expires, anybody can go out and reduplicate that CD and sell it. So the whole thing of remastering is to try and get around that and say, well, actually, this is a new work. We get another 70 years now, because actually what we've done is we've taken something and we've created something new. And I think that there is a certain amount of argument in there that if you have actually taken what was an old recording and you have somehow tidied it up and polished it and done other things to it, but the issue is it enough that it becomes a new copyright work?
I've heard that it's never been challenged.
It's never been challenged.
I think people have done it, and EMI have never actually tried to.
And at the end of the day, if EMI comes after you, it's almost moot, because they're going to have to spend so much money defending yourself against a claim by EMI. You're very aggressive, as we're all representing.
Yeah.
But actually, you know, it's actually cheaper just to clear it in the first place.
So you worry if you cling on to your old records.
Yeah. Yeah, hang on to those in 70 years' time, you know, and use them in your shows.
There's some great audio restoration software I've used on Apple Final Cut. You know, it takes out all the crackles and hiss, and it sounds amazing. It's pretty much what the record companies use themselves. And yeah, so you can do your own cleaning up and help yourself. You know, there's a lot of music out there. The sound recording is expired. Just got 5 minutes or so. I think a couple of questions.
I guess a good question, but is there a difference between recording musicians live and using their CDs, for example, in regards of rights and
the sound recording? Normally, an established band, the record company would own the rights to everything that they perform, whether it's a released commercial recording or a live performance.
Even a live performance, I'm shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the differences is if they're performing live, then, you know, you would do a deal with a record label and you would do a deal with the band. If you're just going to use the discs that they already have created, then you would go to one of the collection societies or the publishers, and they would give you a license direct. But because you're recording it at the time, you don't need to buy that recording. You're actually kind of, you know, creating it as you do it, but you still have to clear it because it's their music and it's their performance, and they own the underlying rights to it. So, I mean, I think that the problem with music generally is that it can get very, very complicated very quickly, because you have sometimes a publisher and a label, you know, and the question is, you know, who has what rights in what material. You know, you might have a composer that retains some rights, you know, so there's a whole range of different things. So the thing to do is to actually ask the questions of the people that you're filming and say, okay, you know, who owns the rights to your music? You know, have you signed a deal with a record label or a publishing company? You know, who composed it? You know, because it might be there if they're doing a cover, in which case it's not just their music, it's actually somebody else's music you also need to know.
They might make an embarrassing mistake as well, and not want it shown through.
No, I was just saying on that note, what happens if you're like filming in a nightclub or a party or something, and a DJ is playing, because we've got this kind of issue right now, they're playing someone else's, they're remixing someone else's music, and if you want to deal with the clearance, isn't it then the DJ who has to clear that in the first place?
No, not necessarily, because the DJ isn't creating a new work and isn't exploiting that. He's playing it live and he's mixing it out, or she.
Right.
But you're actually creating you actually wanted to exploit that beyond just a live performance.
Mm-hmm.
So you would need, obviously release forms from, unfortunately, you need the DJ obviously cleared.
Yeah.
You obviously need the location cleared in terms of being able to film.
Yeah.
You would then need the DJ to tell you which
All
tracks that he had been playing.
Yeah.
And samples if they've got samples.
Yeah, and samples and all sorts of, and you need to go and clear each one individually.
That's the problem, because usually they don't know in our story.
And fair use when you go into that, do you believe?
Not really, no. I mean, if it's in the background and you can't really hear it, then usually one of the easiest ways to do it is just to drop in some live music. Because then you know what the rights are and you know it's clear, it's not a problem. The problem is always, there was a kind of law school, this classic case of actually going through and saying, there was I was filming an interview and there was a marching band going on behind me. Do I need to clear it?
Yeah.
And you can argue incidental use if it's just a tiny little bit, but actually if you're talking about filming in a nightclub with the DJ, then it's more than incidental use, and therefore you do need to specifically clear it.
And also, I was just wondering, because earlier you mentioned about getting clearance for the premise, for the premises, unless you're secret filming.
Yes.
I have a quick question about secret filming. What exactly is secret filming?
Well, secret filming
like
is...
what do they call secret filming?
Well, secret filming is effectively filming without the participant's knowledge.
Right.
So if you have it in a bag or a lapel or a hat or whatever you're doing,
right.
Fancy pair of glasses, perhaps. If it's without the knowledge and the prior approval of the person that you're filming,
right,
then that's kind of secret filming.
Okay.
And then you get into the issue of, okay, under what circumstances do I not need to get permission?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it depends on who you're talking to. It depends what channel you're talking to.
Yeah.
So if you're talking to Channel 4, Channel 4 is pretty robust, and they tend to kind of, their program and their remit is to be quite edgy.
Yeah.
And so they might say, well, you know what, doing that filming we feel is justifiable, and there might be a complaint, but we're going to be quite robust in kind of saying no to that. But you have the conversation with the compliance people and they sign off on it and everyone agrees. Other broadcasters will be much more conservative. So if you are filming something that is perhaps an American broadcaster, they might be much more worried about secret filming.
Right.
And so you often find that sometimes that genre of filming, where it is something that's a bit contentious, actually if you're originating that for an American broadcaster, it's a bit more tough because they are very, very nervous of litigation.
Yeah. But they should give you a good brief.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're going and pitching an idea and they say, yes, we want this, then you have the conversation about what's allowed with their compliance team, because their contract will start from a position of saying you have cleared everything.
Right.
You can't sign that because you haven't cleared everything.
Yeah.
So you need to get them to specifically agree some guidelines before you do your filming, so that you know what it is you can do and what you can't do, and you know what you can deliver. Because the last thing in the world that anyone wants is to deliver something that can't be used.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. We've got some business cards, and we're both really happy for you to contact us at any time in the future with any rights-related questions. But we're not here to sell our businesses at all. It's just
charge for them. Not charge for if you ring you up. Is that what you're saying?
And there's we've got some handouts at the back. We're just going to on the musical side.
I'm on the clearance side. I'm putting together just a note based on the things that we're talking about today, and also the things that people will be talking about tomorrow when we have a similar session. So if you'd like a copy of that, I'll put it on my website, or you can email me for it, and I'll email it out to you.
But thanks to Andrew and thanks to all of you for coming. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, thanks for asking the questions.